Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're going a bit deeper than usual on abstinence, not just the health stuff everyone knows.
Right.
We're looking at the hidden side,
Mhm.
the emotional shifts, the psychological stuff that happens when you choose this path.
Exactly.
We're calling this what no one tells you about abstinence.
We've looked into personal stories, some research, hoping to uncover some, hidden truths.
Yeah, it's really quite something how even today, July 9, 2025, the conversation stays mostly on, okay, it's 100% effective against STIs, unwanted pregnancies, which, I mean, that's crucial, obviously.
Sure, absolutely.
But the deeper mental stuff,
Yeah.
the emotional journey, that whole psychological landscape that opens up,
Yeah.
it's still pretty much uncharted territory for most people.
Mm.
And it doesn't really matter why someone chooses it. Faith, maybe trauma recovery, personal goals. The path itself is just way more complex than saying no.
So it's not just about not doing something. Not at all. And today, we want to dig into that complexity. We're going to focus on 3 big psychological impacts that people often will overlook. Things that can really change a person.
Okay, let's get into it. So you make this choice. Where does the shift start? You mentioned the social world. How does choosing abstinence actually reshape your friendships, your social life? It seems unexpected.
It really can be. It's like a profound recalibration, When you step back from sexual relationships, you often step out of a common language.
A language? How so?
Well, think about how much social chat revolves around dating, relationships, hookups, right?
Yeah, a lot.
When that's not your focus, suddenly those shared stories, those common conversational threads, they just become less relevant to your life. And that can definitely make you feel like an outsider sometimes, or at least kind of operating on a different frequency.
I totally get that.
Yeah.
I remember being at this dinner party. Friends were swapping dating stories. You know, the usual stuff. Bad dates, new flames. And I just felt this wall kind of going up, not because anyone was trying to exclude me, but just because I didn't have anything to add to that specific conversation anymore.
Exactly. It wasn't intentional.
No. And it creates this weird dilemma, right? Do you pretend to be interested? Do you just stay quiet? Or do you say, yeah, I'm actually abstinent? Each one changes the whole dynamic.
It really does.
And sometimes, yeah, you do feel like you get labeled. You become the abstinent friend.
That label and that whole social recalibration thing you mentioned, it acts like a crucible almost for your
Yeah,
friends.
crucible, like it tests them.
Yeah, exactly. It often leads to shedding the, let's say, shallower connections. The ones maybe based mostly on shared party habits or dating talk.
Right.
And instead you lean into deeper friendships, ones based on real respect, shared values, actual connection beyond the surface stuff.
So it clears out the noise a bit.
It can, yeah. And we actually have some data on this. A 2023 study, I think it was in the Journal of Social Psychology, found that 55% over half of abstinent people said their friendships became more meaningful after about 6 months.
Wow. 55%. That's significant.
It is. Those casual ties, the ones built around maybe just going out or dating parallels, they tend to fade. But the connections based on, genuine support, intellectual interests, shared core beliefs, those often get stronger. So this whole process, it really does test every friendship. It asks for more resilience, more authenticity, really, from you and from your friends. It clarifies who's there for the real you versus, the social convenience.
Okay, so that's the external world shifting, your social connections getting tested. But what about inside, the internal experience?
Yeah.
Is there a similar kind of testing or maybe upheaval happening emotionally? Because it sounds like it could be intense.
Oh, it's definitely an internal journey, too. And wild ride is a good way to put it. It's often not what people expect.
How so? Don't people assume it'll just be peaceful, less drama?
Many do, yeah. They think, okay, no more relationship stress, great. And for some, that peace does come. But for a lot of people, it can mean these unexpected emotional swings.
Swings, like what?
You might have moments of feeling really euphoric, super focused, clear-headed, and then bam, suddenly you're hit with intense irritability or frustration or this deep, aching loneliness.
And that's not just psychological. There's a physical basis.
Absolutely. A lot of it can stem from the physiological changes. You're losing those regular hits of mood-boosting chemicals like oxytocin and dopamine that often come with physical intimacy.
Ah, the bonding hormone and the reward chemical.
Exactly. Oxytocin fosters connection, trust, that feeling of well-being. Dopamine drives pleasure, motivation. When your brain isn't getting those regular boosts from intimacy, it starts looking for them elsewhere, or you feel the lack.
So your brain chemistry is actually shifting.
It is, and that recalibration feels like an emotional roller coaster. There was that 2022 report from the American Psychological Association linking those neurochemicals to lower depression rates in sexually active folks. It just highlights how much our brains can rely on those pathways for, well, emotional
I
balance.
remember this one afternoon just feeling this surge of frustration. It wasn't just physical wanting. It was like this deep mental and emotional restlessness. I couldn't sit still.
What did you do?
I ended up just grabbing my journal, scribbling down everything I felt, and then I just went for a run. Like I had to move, had to get it out somehow.
hmm
That's what the roller coaster felt like. It kind of forced me to find new outlets.
That's a perfect example. That emotional chaos, even though it feels really challenging, even disorienting at times, it becomes this powerful
A
catalyst
catalyst for what?
for developing new coping skills, healthier ones, often. When the old ways of getting those mood boosts aren't there, you have to find alternatives.
Like you're running and journaling.
Exactly. Or maybe it's diving into exercise, which gives you endorphins, or trying meditation to calm your nervous system, maybe exploring creative stuff, writing, painting, music, things that give you that sense of accomplishment, that natural dopamine hit.
So you're actively replacing those old pathways.
You are. It's an adjustment period, for sure. But right in the middle of that turmoil, you're actually building emotional intelligence. You're turning the chaos into growth.
Hmm.
Of course, everyone's journey is different. Your experience might not be exactly like that roller coaster. Maybe it was something else for you listening. We'd actually love it if you shared respectfully in the comments below. It's good to learn from each other's stories.
Yeah, definitely share. So, okay, you're navigating these emotional waves, building new coping skills.
Yeah.
It sounds like this naturally leads to turning inward, right?
Hmm.
Does removing sex as maybe a distraction create space for deeper self-reflection, maybe even uncomfortable stuff?
It absolutely does. That leads us right into this. Yeah, uncomfortable, but pretty unavoidable self-confrontation.
Self-confrontation sounds intense.
Well, it can be. When you take away sex, and let's be real, for many people it is a major focus, a major distraction, it silences a lot of the external noise.
Right.
And in that quiet, you're kind of forced to look inward, really look. And that silence, it can reveal insecurities, anxieties, maybe your true motivations, things you might have unconsciously buried or just avoided dealing with because you were busy with relationships or seeking external validation.
That hits home. I know, looking back, I definitely used relationships sometimes to sort of mask feeling inadequate in other areas.
That's very common.
When that's gone, when you're really just with yourself, these huge questions start bubbling up, don't they?
Big time.
Like,
Right.
what do I really want in a partner? Beyond just, the spark. What are my actual core values? Have I been ignoring them?
Yeah.
What about passions I've let slide because I was pouring energy elsewhere?
All those biggies.
It reminds me of what Method Man said about his 2 years of celibacy. He talked about gaining so much clarity, so much control. It felt like real self-discovery for him.
Yeah, that's a great example. It really connects to that Jungian idea of shadow integration, right?
Facing the hidden parts of yourself.
Exactly. Bringing the unacknowledged stuff, the fears, the desires, the uncomfortable truths into the light so you can actually deal with them and grow.
And this isn't just anecdotal, right? There's research on this self-awareness boost.
There is a 2024 study in Self and Identity found that 62%, again, a solid majority of celibate participants, reported better self-awareness after a year.
62%.
And what's really key here is that this intense honesty, this introspection, it's not just about facing the tough stuff. It actively builds self-love, self-acceptance.
How so?
Because when you truly understand your own patterns, your insecurities, your real values, your authentic desires, you start to accept yourself more fully. You're laying groundwork
Groundwork for?
for everything, really, but especially for future relationships. When you know yourself that well, you're way less likely to settle or to get into relationships for unhealthy reasons. You can connect more authentically.
So that tough internal work has long-term payoff.
Huge long-term benefits. It shapes how you approach pretty much everything, not just romance.
Okay, so we've covered social shifts, the emotional roller coaster, this deep self-confrontation. What about isolation? That feels like it could be a big unspoken part of this journey too.
It definitely can be. It's one of those consequences people often don't see coming or maybe underestimate.
How does it usually show up?
Well, like we touched on with the social stuff, your circle can literally shrink. Friends who are all about dating might just drift. There's less common ground, maybe fewer shared activities.
Yeah, the dynamic changes.
And then there are the cultural norms, especially in, say, Western cultures. There's often this subtle or not so subtle idea that being sexually active is part of being a normal adult, part of social connection.
Right, like it's a milestone or something.
Exactly. So choosing abstinence can sometimes get you labeled as, well, odd, or maybe immature, or just out of sync. And that can lead to feeling sidelined, excluded.
I remember being at this party feeling so. Outside, everyone was chatting in couples or talking about dating drama, and I just felt like I was watching it all happen from behind glass.
That's a powerful image.
It wasn't overt exclusion, but it was a real feeling.
Yeah.
Like being invisible in a crowded room, it can be lonely.
It absolutely can be lonely. But here's where we pivot, because there's often a profound silver lining to that solitude.
Okay, what's the upside to feeling isolated?
While that initial isolation feels tough, no doubt, it very often becomes the exact space where deep introspection happens.
Because the distractions are gone.
Precisely. Fewer social obligations, maybe less external noise. You get this unique chance to really sit with yourself, to listen to your inner voice, figure out your own needs, your own desires, without all that outside pressure.
And that leads to
Independence, self-reliance. You learn to enjoy your own company, find joy in things you genuinely love, not just things you do to be social. You build internal resources.
Is there any data on that? Like, does solitude actually build strength here?
Yeah, interestingly, a 2023 study in the Loneliness Research Journal focusing specifically on this kind of experience showed 48% of abstinent individuals reported developing a stronger self-identity through periods of solitude linked to their choice.
Stronger self-identity. What does that look like?
Often clearer personal boundaries, a better grasp of their core values, more confidence in just walking their own path, even if it looks different.
So the isolation, while hard, forces a kind of growth.
You could say that. It becomes like a crucible for personal strength, you know?
Yeah.
It turns that loneliness into a forge for character. It builds resilience, self-assuredness.
Okay, so you navigate the social stuff, the emotions, the self-confrontation, even the isolation, and find strength in it. What happens over the longer term? As abstinence continues, how does the psyche keep evolving? It can't just plateau, right?
No, definitely not. It's an ongoing evolution. And this is where all that earlier work, the coping skills, the self-awareness really starts to compound and pay dividends.
How so? Do things get easier?
Generally, yes. Those wild emotional swings we talked about earlier, they tend to stabilize quite a bit. Why? Because those new coping mechanisms you built become second nature.
Like the meditation or creative outlets.
Exactly. Maybe you stick with meditation. There was a 2024 study in the Mindfulness Journal showing regular practice can cut anxiety by about 20%. Or you keep up with creative work, writing, art, learning an instrument, which consistently gives you those healthy dopamine boosts from engagement and accomplishment.
So you're finding sustainable ways to manage your internal state.
Precisely. You've essentially rewired some of those pathways in a healthier, more self-sufficient way.
And does that self-confrontation piece continue to play a role?
Absolutely. That deep dive into yourself yields lasting clarity. You become much better at aligning your actions with your actual values. You're more discerning about your time, your energy, who you let into your life. You know what truly fulfills you, separate from external validation or relationship status.
It sounds a bit like what you hear from, say, spiritual practitioners who choose celibacy.
There are definite parallels. Think about monks, for example. Celibacy is often core to their practice. And studies, like one from Monastic Studies in 2023, found they report significantly higher life satisfaction, like 70% higher compared to the general population.
Wow.
Now, their reasons are spiritual, but the psychological outcomes, increased self-control, focus, inner peace, they overlap significantly with what many experience through long-term abstinence for personal reasons.
So it's about building a resilient mind.
That's a great way to put it. This whole psychological evolution crafts a truly resilient mind. Over the long haul, the gains aren't just additive, they compound. It leads to a genuinely redefined identity, stronger, more authentic, more self-directed.
Okay, so let's quickly recap these hidden truths then. We've got the social rewiring, that unexpected shift in friendships.
The filtering process.
Then the emotional roller coaster driven by those neurochemical shifts.
And the coping skills you build because of it.
Followed by that intense, sometimes uncomfortable, but necessary self-confrontation.
Leading to deeper self-awareness and self-love.
Then navigating the potential for isolation, but finding that silver lining of independence.
Turning solitude into strength.
And finally, this long-term psychological evolution, building resilience and clarity over time.
Exact.
It really paints abstinence not just as a physical choice, but as this deep, complex mental odyssey.
Absolutely. And looking at it broadly, yes, it can be challenging. Parts of it are tough, but ultimately, it's incredibly empowering.
Empowering how?
It helps you find out who you really are, away from all the noise, the societal expectations, the relationship pressures. It underscores that abstinence is a valid, powerful choice. It's about reclaiming control of your mind, your values, your life path.
And the reasons are personal.
Entirely personal, deeply individual, and
Yeah.
totally valid, whatever they are.
So here's maybe final thought for everyone listening. Beyond just abstinence itself, thinking about this whole mental odyssey, how might understanding these kinds of hidden impacts encourage us to look more consciously at all our major life choices
Yeah.
and the unexpected ways they might be shaping our inner world? Something to chew on. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. We really appreciate you exploring these often unspoken aspects of abstinence with us. For more insights like this, definitely check out Mind Expansion Daily.
Yeah, it's so important to have these kinds of in-depth conversations, getting beyond the surface level. We really value you engaging with us on this.
And hey, if this deep dive resonated with you, if it struck a chord, please do take a second to like and subscribe to Mind Expansion Daily. It genuinely helps us keep bringing you these kinds of explorations.
It really does.
And remember that challenge from earlier about sharing your own experiences. We meant it. Leave a comment below. Tell us if you agree or disagree with our take on these overlooked aspects. We're really eager to hear your stories, your perspectives. Let's keep the conversation going.